All Indiana Politics is your premier source for Indiana politics, focusing on issues that matter to you.
I still want us to be the best in the Midwest.
We can't afford another lockdown.
Give the citizens of this country the relief they need.
Education in the state of Indiana remains priority number one.
In-depth, nonpartisan coverage.
We don't know exactly where the economy will be in January.
People are worried with good reason.
Exclusive interviews with Indiana's political leaders.
We have the resources here in the state of Indiana to care for those who are in need.
Expert analysis on critical legislation.
We need to reform those laws.
This recovery is going to take some time.
We've got to anticipate that there'll be a budget shortfall.
From Wish TV, this is All Indiana Politics Podcast on the All Indiana Podcast Network.
Good Sunday morning. Welcome to another edition of All Indiana Politics. I'm Phil Sanchez. It's the marquee race in Indiana politics. Who will succeed Governor Eric Holcomb? Holcomb is term limited and cannot run for another term. All three of the candidates to succeed him are familiar to voters. Republican Senator Mike Braun is leaving Washington to run for the governor's chair. Democrat Jennifer McCormick was Indiana's last elected superintendent of public instruction. She held that office as a Republican from 2017 to 2021. And Libertarian Donald Rainwater returns from the 2020 race. Our government reporter Garrett Bergquist talked to all three candidates about how they plan to serve you. We begin with Mike Braun.
Let's begin with property taxes. Your plan would expand the deductions available to homeowners and cap the rate at which property taxes are allowed to grow. How do you ensure that this doesn't deprive local governments of the revenue they need?
So it's interesting, if local units had adjusted their rates down with the increased assessed value, it'd be kind of a moot point. Many of them didn't, though. So where they would have had a windfall over the last couple, 3 years in property taxes, all the complaining about them going up 15 to 20%, that's where the reset needed to occur. Plus, to put a cap on it going forward. The circuit breakers were intended to do that, but that was assuming no inflation. So we're getting, now that people understand the concept, remember the details will be worked out by the legislature, but the idea that your property tax bills can grow faster than your ability to pay them or the growth of the economy is what most like in terms of preventing it in the future. And then the reset feature of it really isn't going to make much difference other than to the jurisdictions that did not do what probably should have been done, is taking the rate real down to reflect the increase in assessed values.
How do you plan to encourage economic growth outside of the major cities and outside of major districts such as LEAP?
That's going to be easy. I come from one of those corners of the state that doesn't see a lot of it, and there are 4 corners to the state, and we are going to still need to do the best of what we've done that gets in some of the needed industry. I'm really going to be interested, is it going to be more than just CapEx? Are we creating a lot of high-paying jobs? And then I'm going to really focus on the field of how do we help startups, small businesses, entrepreneurs. They just need more organic help. It's not going to take a major investment. It may change how we help them become more enabled. And you're going to get dividends from every corner of the state in between, because small businesses never get much attention. You never know when that next business, homegrown, is going to be that next big business that grows in your state.
Would you make any changes to Indiana's abortion ban, either to further tighten or loosen any of the restrictions around it?
I think the legislature dealt with that when they put the law in effect. And I think it'd be up to them. I don't know how much input they've been getting from either side. I think we were the first to do it, and that law was crafted after listening to Hoosiers, and it would be up to them to see if they're wanting to change anything.
Indiana's Medicaid system is currently short about $1 billion, and that's led to some pretty significant service cuts. So 2 questions. First, if you were elected governor, would you implement any emergency funding as soon as you took office? And then second, what's your long-term plan to fix the problem and prevent future issues like what we saw once the new budget goes into effect July 1st?
That's the blessing of having good structural cash flow. That $750 million issue was a miscalculation on how many people wanted to actually do things in their own home to take advantage of that option when it comes to Medicaid. So good cash flow can cover it. That can't be an annual issue. So my approach to health care is clear. I fixed it in my own company. We have to, in our own state, where we have some of the highest health care costs, some of the poorest outcomes, especially infant maternal mortality, we got to fix it from the bottom up, and wellness and prevention, not expensive remediation, that is the way to get it done. And I've done it in my own business. We can do that in our own state health care plans. I want to make it easier for businesses to be able to pool and associate to get the best insurance you can get for your employees. And then it's going to be a case of Indiana leading, whether the government is the payor through Medicare or Medicaid, or it's through the private sector. We've got to get our results better, and it's got to be based upon wellness and prevention.
You've called for universal school vouchers. Is there a risk that we're going to create a two-class educational system when we do this? Your opponent has said that that's going to allow private schools to discriminate against kids who are trying to get in throughout those vouchers.
I think if we were taking resources away from the public education system, I come from a place where the public schools are great. My wife and I attended them. Our kids did. Our grandkids are. Not all places have that. So when it comes to vouchers, choice, competition, we need to be embracing it. And the argument that they make, that's just not true. It's not a zero-sum game. We've been resourcing public education in all schools with more resources each year. I've been adamant about getting more of that into teacher pay and benefits at a level higher than what my opponent has recommended. And when you're investing currently $245,000 into a classroom annually, when you look at teacher pay, maintenance, upkeep, depreciation, there's a lot that we're putting into the classroom that probably needs to be devoted more to teachers and instruction as opposed to building, plant, and equipment and the maintenance of it.
All right, coming up, Democrat Jennifer McCormick explains why she should lead the state. Welcome back. Democrats have not held the governor's chair since the late Joe Kernan left office in 2005. They hope to change that this year with a former Republican, Jennifer McCormick. She sat down with Garrett Bergquist.
So let's begin with your education plan. You've called for significant increases in teacher pay. How do you plan to pay for it?
Yeah, first of all, we have to get that pay up to be competitive with non-educator professionals. Right now we have 3,300 openings and we're never going to fill them. So it's a matter of getting that salary up, which we know is going to be expensive, but that also is a reminder that we're giving $1.6 billion to private schools that are going away from our public schools. And so that would be a huge chunk of it without raising taxes, without just reallocating where those dollars go.
You would tighten up the eligibility requirements for the vouchers then?
I would tighten up the voucher program, absolutely. Right now, the eligibility is $220,000 deemed to be the poverty level for a voucher and for a family of four. And so, and I'm sure they're trying to go after universal vouchers the next session, and I'm sure my opponent is going to support that. But to me, it's about making sure that our public schools are taken care of, as it is a constitutional requirement, and there's a lot of money there that could go right back into our teachers.
Let's turn to property taxes. You've called for increasing the homeowner deduction by $1,000, increasing the state and local income tax deduction by $1,500, and expanding senior citizen deductions. How did you arrive at those numbers?
From the beginning, we've talked about bringing back common sense and bipartisanship, bringing back the balance to the State House. So to come up with our plan, we looked at really good language that had been submitted by good legislative language that had been submitted by Republicans and Democrats, put a plan together that made sense, that already had a fiscal on it. So on day one, we could roll it out and people could have relief, all Hoosiers, but particularly our seniors, our renters, our veterans, but all Hoosiers would have a little bit of that relief. Our plan differed from our opponent, who his first plan and version 2.0, since his first one was so bad, but our plan did not go after the local level. And I think that's why it was so well received, because we still have to fund our schools and our libraries and our parks and our fire and our police.
How do you minimize the loss of revenue?
And again, that's what we were trying to balance as far as the state sitting on a big surplus. So making sure that we're doing our due diligence to make sure we have a surplus still, but chipping into that a little bit to provide relief that so many Hoosiers are saying they need, without going after the local level that are already telling us that they are strapped.
Indiana's Medicaid system is short about $1 billion, and that's led to some very significant service cuts. First, would you implement any emergency funding for it once you became governor? And then second, what's your long-term plan to fix that problem and prevent any future issues after the next budget takes effect on July 1st of next year?
I'm not a believer in you beat up people who are implementing the program. I think you have oversight and leadership and you hold them accountable. But one, doing a review of what is the problem, and I've been told that there are a lot of different problems and for a lot of different reasons. But I've also heard from those families who their children don't have the care they deserve. They're on big waiting lists for adults that they'll never get, or they were providing care for their family members that now they can't get that reimbursement, or it's much less. And so it's impacting not only just individuals, but our economy, because now we're strapping people who want to get in the workforce that can't. So making sure, one, we figure out what the problems are and do a deep review of that, but also, two, being good partners at the federal level, because it is matching, and making sure that we are getting every dollar we can possibly get, and then be responsible going forward with planning and doing what we can do in order to fix it. It's not a fast fix. It just is not, because it's so expensive and it's such a mess. But it comes back to using common sense, bringing the right people at the table to find a solution.
You've called for restoring access to abortion services and passing a constitutional amendment to protect abortion. Is that realistic given the makeup of the legislature? The Republican Party very likely is going to control the legislature after Election Day, or at least one chamber.
Yeah, again, it's common sense. We're hearing from over 80% of the Hoosiers that want a citizen-led ballot initiative, so they have a voice in whether it's women's reproductive freedoms, or whether it's cannabis, or whether it's voucher programs. Right now, Kentucky's running a citizen-led initiative ballot question on vouchers. You know, let us have our voice. And isn't it sad that we're having to basically beg to have just the initiative put forth? But again, it goes back to working across the aisle, using that platform to better inform Hoosiers that we're one of the few states that doesn't have that option, but also to working with the General Assembly in order to get it done. I'm committed to it, but we'll see if our Republican friends are as well. But Hoosiers deserve that. We deserve a voice, and we deserve citizen-led ballot initiatives.
One of the criticisms that's been leveled at the IEDC, particularly with regard to the LEAP district, is that it seems to be prioritizing economic growth in some parts of the state at the expense of other parts. So how would you ensure that all parts of the state see some economic growth?
And I've heard from a lot of locally elected officials at the, across the state, and they like the READY grants, they like the Stellar grants where it's targeted in regional growth. Now, they're not seeing the type of money that's in Boone right now for that particular LEAP project, but they like the approach of regional type of monies to give them to attract and retain good business and business development. And so continuing what's working. Now, they have said we need some red tape off that program a little bit, hold us accountable, but let us do what we need to do. So continue on what's working with a targeted approach, but also spread the wealth. I mean, there's a lot of places in Indiana that are desperately needing that quality of life that goes right back to economic development. So the approach is good, it's just how those dollars are being disseminated.
All right, coming up, we hear from Libertarian candidate Donald Rainwater. Welcome back. Libertarian Donald Rainwater won more than 11% of the vote in 2020. That was by far the best performance of any third-party candidate for governor since before the Civil War. He wants to improve that margin this year and make it to the governor's mansion. He made his case to our Garrett Bergquist.
Housing costs have become a major issue in this election cycle, so let's begin with property taxes. I understand that you want to stop charging property taxes once someone has owned a home for 7 years.
I have proposed that we set the property tax at 1% of the purchase price of the property for a maximum of 7 years. That kind of goes with our 7% sales tax. And if someone wanted to pay that all at closing, roll it into their mortgage and amortize it over 30 years to reduce the impact of that, however they wanted to do it, if they want to escrow it 1% a year for 7 years, it's really, the proposal is designed to highlight the fact that we have to meet those two goals. We've got to make it so that property taxes don't keep going up on folks, and that there's an end date, that we're not paying property taxes in perpetuity to the government.
Indiana's Medicaid system is currently short $1 billion, and that's led to some very significant service cuts. So 2 questions. First, would you implement any emergency funding for that agency once you become governor if you are elected? And second, what's your long-term plan to fix the problem and prevent future issues, beginning with the budget that takes effect on July 1st of next year? It's my understanding that they found $724 million worth of overbilling that they paid for Medicaid, and that they did not go back and collect that money that they were overbilled. And so that that accounts for about 3/4 of that $1 billion shortfall. So the first thing I would do is say, hey, we need to go and get that money back that we were overbilled and that we overpaid, because we shouldn't be cutting people's promised Medicaid off because we made a mistake. I also am really troubled by the fact that we have a lot of Hoosiers sitting on a wait list for Medicaid, not months, some people for years are on this wait list. The Medicaid program evidently is not being managed very well. And we need to make sure that we have people in FSSA who are managing the program correctly and who are focused on delivering the service that the government has promised to the citizens that they promised that service to. Would you support a repeal of Indiana's abortion ban? I would not support a repeal of it. What I support is that, first of all, it needs to go through the court system. That's why we have 3 branches of government. And I would support every Hoosier citizen who feels that there are changes that need to be made to contact their legislators and get their legislators to do what needs to be done. This is not an issue that one person should make a decision on. This is something that the citizens of the state of Indiana need to decide. You've called for universal school choice. Now, would that include taxpayer-funded vouchers? So at this point it would, because that's what we currently have as far as our state constitution says that we will fund common schools. I believe that one of the foundational truths about the economy is that monopolies are bad. I think everyone will agree that when there's a monopolistic situation in consumer services, that quality decreases and cost increases. We spend half of our state budget, half, on education. And our state standardized testing says that 63% of our children are not proficient in English and math. When I went to school, 63% was a failing grade. 20% of our third graders can't read at the 3rd grade level. Evidently, our public school monopoly is failing our kids, and we need to rethink the whole process and the whole program, because it's not working. How do you plan to encourage economic growth outside of the major cities? Well, I think first of all, what we have to do is we have to understand that a lot of what we're doing by
putting the heavy hand of government on the scales is discouraging the growth, right? When the government says, well, we're going to do this and we're going to do it here, it's usually to benefit somebody, not to benefit the general populace. And so if we can get government out of the conversation and allow local concerns to come together to attract new opportunity, I think everyone then will have an equal shot.
All right, thank you for joining us for All Indiana Politics this week. We'll be back here next Sunday morning at 9:30. Remember, early voting continues until November 4th. Election Day is November 5th. If you would like to hear more from the candidates on this week's show, check out our All Indiana Politics podcast online at wishtv.com. That's it for us for now. Have a great rest of your weekend.
From Wish TV, this is All Indiana Politics Podcast on the All Indiana Podcast Network. Watch All Indiana Politics live Sunday mornings at 9:30 on Wish TV and at wishtv.com. Subscribe to this podcast and listen weekly here on the All Indiana Podcast Network. And be sure to discover even more great podcasts at allindianapodcastnetwork.com.